Hello and welcome to the Matthew Rocke Show for this week of February 14th. It's great to have you along for the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Just like last week, we got a lot to cover. We also have two special interviews in the episode, so stay tuned for those. A lot of really fun stories to cover, but we're going to get started with, of course, the top headlines from these last 5 days, and we're going to go back to the border north of us in Canada, and we're going to cover what's been going on in the Freedom Convoy. Of course, the big news of the week came out Monday when Trudeau announced that he would be invoking the Emergencies Act, which grants the government of Canada broad powers as it tries to dismantle a 3-week-old blockade that has paralyzed Ottawa. However, as that news came out, protesters remain unfazed as they began scheduling haircut appointments, receiving massages, and, well, just living life as normal, at least as normal as it has been since they occupied the downtown area in Ottawa at the end of January. Hundreds of semi-trucks parked in front of Canada's Parliament have become kind of the emblematic of the protests, but planning and logistics for the occupation is run from a hotel parking lot on Coventry Road, which is about 5 kilometers east of the downtown area. Sandwiched between a baseball diamond and a detachment of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the encampment offers meals, shelter, warm clothes, and restrooms for protesters. It also has a barber shop and 2 saunas. Jeff, a retired trucker who arrived in Ottawa 17 days ago, shares of a sense of purpose that has increased since the protesters arrived. He says, quote, "There's a sense of unity here, and I think it's only increased since yesterday. When you've seen the light, it's hard to go back to the dark," unquote. Meanwhile, camp residents, while Trudeau was making the announcement yesterday, were holding an open mic event to share their stories. Jeff says, quote, "Everyone had a story of loss or tragedy. So many people have suffered in these last few years. They've lost jobs, they've lost homes, they've lost family. That's why they're here." The high level of organization with delegated roles and a growing group of volunteers reflects protesters' intentions to remain in the city for the foreseeable future, despite opposition from local residents and the increasing exasperation of city, provincial, and federal government. The emergency legislation includes measures intended to put intense pressure on the protesters, including the possibility of losing their commercial driver's license, but none of the camp members are all that prepared to leave. Some in the encampment claim that about 88% of Canadians above the age of 5 have been fully vaccinated and are nonetheless frustrated with the lengthy and restrictive nature of both provincial and federal public health measures. While protesters say the federal government's enforcement actions did not come as a surprise, some have nonetheless taken defensive steps. One trucker said he never imagined the protests would evolve into a sustained presence in the city with a fully operational camp, but he said he has no intention of leaving anytime soon. That, of course, is an article from Tuesday, so following when Trudeau's announcement came on Monday. Here's the latest that has come out here at the end of the week. The incredible powers of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has given his government to freeze people's bank accounts is based on their reliance on analysis from the CBC. This is according to a 14-page document the government tabled in the House of Commons Wednesday night, detailing the supposed rationale for invoking the Emergencies Act in the first place. On Thursday, Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland confirmed that bank accounts had begun complying with the government's orders and were freezing people's bank accounts. While Freeland made it sound as if only truckers with big rigs would be targeted, the rules stipulate the banks can freeze anyone directly or indirectly involved with the protests. While constitutional law experts and civil liberties groups have said the threshold has not been met for the government to invoke the act, the 14-page document the Liberals offered up presents their own, more formal arguments to back them up. The actual facts presented are shockingly thin and are mostly a regurgitation of online news stories. Quote, it remains possible that the Trudeau government has evidence, such as intelligence reports, of a credible national security threat within the Freedom Convoy sufficient to justify invoking this extraordinary law, says Aaron Woodrick, a lawyer who works with the MacDonald Lawyer Institute, wrote this in a guest column for the Toronto Sun. He continues, quote, if they have such evidence, they should immediately make it clear publicly, unquote. It's a great point. Maybe it was true, but it now appears that the Liberals do not possess any secret knowledge. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The basis for some of the most controversial measures they brought in merely rely on nothing more than CBC reporting. And if you're not familiar with what the acronym CBC is for, it's the Canadian Broadcasting Company. The act, according to the government, quote, requires a comprehensive list of financial service providers to determine whether any of the property in their possession or control belong to protesters participating in the illegal blockades and to cease dealing with those protesters, unquote. That means anyone associated with a protest could conceivably lose their banking and any mortgages they may have. The document later circles back again to justify the financial measure, saying, quote, the importance of this measure is highlighted by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's recent reporting about the crowdfunding website GiveSendGo.com, which indicated that the majority of the donations to the protests were made by donors outside of Canada, unquote. That's it. No departmental reports underline this assessment, no RCMP intel, nothing except a story that was put together by 3 CBC reporters. The whole thing is an unjustifiable mess. And that last little bit of opinion all coming from the Toronto Sun. And there's a lot going on in Canada, no doubt. And there's a lot of freedoms on the line in Canada right now. And I think we can kind of look at this from a distance and say, wow, I'm glad I'm not in Canada. But I hope this makes us think about our own freedoms and what we have to be grateful for in America, but even more importantly, what we've been entrusted with and what we have to protect. All right, moving on now to the state of Virginia, calling it a win for all Virginians. Governor Glen Youngkin on Wednesday signed into law a long-promised ban on mask mandates in the Commonwealth schools. The bill, SB 739, allows parents to, quote, elect for their child to not wear a mask while on school property, unquote, regardless of any COVID-19 protection mandates passed by local school boards or issued by state agencies. At the signing ceremony in Richmond, Youngkin said of the move, quote, we are reaffirming the rights that we know all parents have, citing parents' rights to make their decisions for their children, unquote. The bill passed the Virginia Senate on a bipartisan 21-19 vote last week and a party line 52-48 vote in the House on Monday. Under regular rules, the bill won't go into effect until July 1st, but the General Assembly passed a Youngkin amendment that lets the law go into effect immediately and gives school districts until March 1st to comply. Well, last week on the Matthew Rocke Show, we talked about the Don't Say Gay bill, which is out of Florida, and a follow-up article to that. Republicans in states across America are targeting LGBTQ rights through a wave of educational gag orders. A free speech group has warned as conservatives battle to censor discussion of race and sexual identities in schools. More than 100 bills censoring teachers have been introduced in state legislatures this year, reported by PEN America, a nonprofit which works to protect freedom of expression in the U.S., in what the organization says is a, quote, national assault on our education system, unquote. The warning comes as conservatives have launched efforts to ban books pertaining to race and LGBTQ+ issues from classrooms in various states. PEN America says, quote, from book bans to educational gag orders, schools and universities are being threatened today to a degree that has no recent parallel. There is a willingness and even eagerness to bring the weight and power of government to bear on controlling classroom speech. In the last year, PEN America counted 155 bills introduced in 38 states that would censor what teachers can say or teach in classrooms. And I want to stop right here and make this very clear. This is misinformation. This organization, Pen America, I'm not super familiar with them, but here's two things that are completely false. One, quote, being threatened today to a degree that has no recent parallel. No, that's not true. Universities and schools have been threatened, have been coerced, have been forced into propagating the left's motives and actions for the last 100 years. I mean, think of all the things that they've thrown out of schools or been forced to throw out of schools. Creation, prayer, anything about religious. Counselors who are trying to counsel people about homosexual or gender identity, from a biblical perspective. All of those things have been completely stripped from our schools. And I think that's a really important thing to realize here is, yes, I think that taking the ability to talk about race and LGBTQ issues away from the classroom is a limit of the left's free speech. I think it's a fair action considering what they've taken away from the right. And so if they want to have a fair and level playing field when it comes to talking about this stuff, they have to be willing to give it too. Another story that came out this week on Tuesday dealing with education, wasn't directly, but it was about a school. The Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting that happened in December of 2012. The families of 9 victims settled on Tuesday with gunmaker Remington for $73 million for the rifle that was used to kill 20 first graders and 6 educators. The case was closely watched by gun control advocates, gun rights supporters, and manufacturers because of its potential to provide a roadmap for victims of other shootings to sue firearm makers. The families and the survivor of the shooting sued Remington in 2015, saying the company should have never sold such a dangerous weapon to the public. And again, the premise of where this is coming from is from a worldview of where there's no absolutes of right and wrong, but also where the environment's the problem. People are basically good, and it's only when they get put in bad environments or are given bad tools that they do bad things. And the reality is, as we know from a biblical worldview, no man is fallen, man is sinful, man is inherently bad, and what they desire is what's contrary to God. And so, no, it's nothing to do with the gun. No, it's nothing to do with a knife. No, it's nothing to do with any form of weapon or tool that they can use for violence or for sin or for evil. It's the heart of humanity. And that's a really, really important thing that we have to keep in mind. Moving to 2 other stories. First of all, from the world of sports, Major League Baseball has canceled the first week of spring training games through March 4th in their first public acknowledgement of the disruption caused by the lockout. The announcement came Friday with a work stoppage in its 79th day and a day after talks on economics between management and the Major League Baseball Players Association lasted just 15 minutes. Spring training games was to have started this week, as well as the exhibition schedule on February 26th. And into our final news story, the number of children overdosing and dying from illegal drugs is skyrocketing. Many young people are unknowingly buying counterfeit pills, often through social media, that are laced with fentanyl, an opioid up to 100 times more potent than heroin. Special Agent Robert Murphy with the Drug Enforcement Administration said that kids who think they're buying Xanax or OxyContin from a drug dealer are getting knockoffs, fake pills that are laced with fentanyl most of the time. Murphy says, quote, "They should be watching cartoons and eating bad cereal. They shouldn't be dropping dead from taking counterfeit pills," unquote. Just a few milligrams of the drug can be fatal. Previous generations of middle schoolers were never usually taking such a dangerous risk if they experimented with substances. While still rare, drug deaths among children ages 10 to 14 have more than tripled from 2019 to 2020. Well, here on the Matthew Rocke Show, we're going to jump into our next section of the podcast for this week. And I'm going to bring in my first guest of the show. This is someone who I look up to. He is my older brother, Levi Rocke, and Levi serves as a pastor in Black Creek, Wisconsin. And thanks so much for taking the time to join me today, Levi.
Well, thanks for having me, Matthew.
Well, so this last article that you guys were just hearing about, as I was sharing about just the tripling of overdose deaths among middle schoolers, and just kind of how shocking that is. Levi spent some time in the medical world as a EMT and first responder prior to getting into pastoral ministry. But then, even within pastoral ministry, I know through counseling and other things you've done, you've interacted with families who've been impacted by drugs or substance abuse in some ways. And so I guess kind of just a very open question here to get started. Why are younger people, are at such a younger age than ever before, becoming more and more attracted and interested in drugs and substances, something that we really haven't seen before?
Well, Matthew, I think it's a sad symptom of the disease of sin, obviously. But really, when it comes to younger children, it's really the breakdown of our culture in general and the family in general. I believe God is intended for us to be satisfied in Him alone, obviously. But on top of that, or within that, being satisfied in Him, He's given us families. He's given us parents. He's given us siblings. He's given us grandparents, and so on and so forth. And because the family unit, the nuclear family, has been broken to pieces, shredded, really, in our culture and around the world in many cases, I think that's part of the reason, that's part of what's causing this breakdown among children. They're not finding security. They're not finding safety. They're not being taught purpose. And they're not even valued as human beings so many times, whether it's in their schooling that they're getting or the entertainment industry or social media. There's a desperate longing for satisfaction, for peace, for joy, for fulfillment. And of course, those things can really only be found in God alone and in the healthy relationships that He's designed us to participate in. And so when a child grows up in a family where they maybe don't know their mother or their father or both, they may have, their parent has had multiple partners. They maybe have been abused. They see their friends on social media who maybe seem happy or maybe don't seem happy. And all their mind is filled with is the garbage of the entertainment industry, of what they see on even in the news, and of course what they're being taught in school too, which oftentimes is really that you don't have any inherent value. There is no absolute truth. Really, what you decide is what your life is going to be. And so I think that's part of what drives this whole thing. Maybe there's also an element of the peer pressure. That's maybe the bedrock is what I just said. But then there's also an element of peer pressure. Your friends, who maybe are the only people that you look up to in your life. They're maybe the only people that have a lot of influence in your life, because all of the other influences you look at are not very they're not stalwart, they're not strong, they're not courageous, and they don't have that to look up to. The children can be influenced by other children, and so if maybe this child is kind of on the fringe of, they're not really a bad child or bad, they're not getting into trouble, but they hang around with some people who are, that can lead them down that road as well. And like that article talked about, just the intertwinement of drugs and just how that leads to, obviously drugs are addictive, and so they lead to worse and worse drugs. So oftentimes, but even the drugs that are maybe not considered as detrimental, like Oxycontin, well, it's a very addictive drug. And like that article I talked about, the being laced with fentanyl. Fentanyl is extremely deadly. And even fentanyl itself is a pain medication, which, some of these kids could get into that, just even trying to get into that as well, knowing how powerful of a drug that is. So anyways, just to sum up those two things, the one thing I think is the breakdown that we see in our culture, where we have gone, because we love our sin and because we don't want God. That's led to the breakdown of the family unit. It's led down to the breakdown of the safety, the security, the satisfaction that children are designed to find, not only in their Creator, but also within the family units that God has put them within. And then also with that, second with that perhaps is the whole, bad company corrupts good morals, and that whole that whole thing. You hang out with the wrong crowd, and that can really get you into a lot of trouble.
Definitely great thoughts there. One thing that you kind of mentioned in your first thought that I think I want to circle back on, because I think it's also really true, is just the lack of role models that exist in our culture these days. Especially when you think of the entertainment industry or even the sports industry. Generally, as a young person, those are kind of two groups that you're going to pull a lot of your role models for, or from, the people that you're going to look up to and really respect. And the problem is that, especially within the entertainment industry and within music, if you're listening to secular artists, those, for the most part, are probably drug addicts themselves, and people who are, using substance freely. And I think that also is a huge reflection too of how things have changed, of the fact that younger people are no longer looking up to people who really should be looked up to, and it's just a sad reflection of where our culture is at, when that's kind of the face of it, and what we have to offer. We've just got a couple of minutes here left, and I want to turn this question over to you, from the spiritual side, because I think it's something that maybe we don't think about enough, and that's the fact that we have the ability to influence other people, even people we don't necessarily have a direct relationship with. But maybe we're their only hope. We're the only hope they're going to see of the gospel. We're their only hope they're going to see of somebody who has an absolute, or a view of absolute morality and truth. And maybe we're the only ones who's going to really show them God's love. So I don't know, what would you say to someone as a form of encouragement to really make an investment in young people's lives around them?
Well, I think first and foremost, it starts with our own relationship with the Lord. We have to be seeking Him and finding our satisfaction in Him if we're ever going to be able to help somebody else to do the same thing. So that's first and foremost. But with that, I think, is prayer. We all have young people around us, and maybe we don't actually have a relationship at this point with any young person, whether it is one of our own children or grandchildren, or it's somebody around us in our church, in our community. Maybe we don't have that personal relationship yet, but I think prayer is of utmost importance. Praying for them, maybe it's there's a young man or a young woman in the community that you know of, a cashier at the grocery store even, and you've had a couple of short conversations, just the general, how's it going, how's your day going, or what's the weather, or talking about the weather, I should say. But you've heard their name. Begin to pray for that person. But then I would also encourage people to be intentional with building relationships with young people. There's one thing, if there's anything, which there's been a lot of things, but if there's one thing that has really really been embedded in me in my time as a pastor, it's the reality of the brokenness in homes. And it can appear to be fine at home, and that looks like a wonderful couple, and then you find out more about them, or you find out more about their marriage, and there can be a lot of brokenness. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, mom and dad got divorced. It could just be there's a rough relationship here. There's a repetitive pattern of sin that's been happening, particularly with fathers, and that can lead to a lot of brokenness within a family. And so be intentional about building relationships with young people. Maybe it is inviting them to go along with you to go golfing. I mean, that's maybe I don't know. That's the first thing that came to mind, but it could be it could be really
Right.
anything. Some sort of activity, even maybe an activity you're not comfortable doing, but that they are comfortable doing. They enjoy doing. Obviously, not something wrong, but just an activity that that's not really my thing. Going disc golfing. Well, that's not really my thing, but I'll do it so that I can spend time with this young person. I might stink. I might have a terrible score, but at least I'm hanging out with this person and building this relationship. But then I think the other thing is especially when you have schools near you or opportunities to get involved in a some sort of relationship with a group of children, presenting them with your life as a reflection of Jesus, I think is that's a really important thing as well, because they need to see that there is fulfillment, there is joy, there is happiness in Jesus, there is gentleness, there's kindness, there's love, and not the kind of love that the world offers, but real, deep, intimate, genuine love that really thinks the best and cares the best for other people. Because again, that's oftentimes I think there's so much emptiness in the heart of children and adults, but we're talking about children specifically here, that they need to see that there is something beyond what their little world or their perspective or their broken home or their friends are showing them.
Yeah, absolutely. We have run out of time here for this week, but I know you will be on again here at some point in the near future. But I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing some thoughts about this.
Well, thank you, Matthew. It's it's a privilege. So Lord bless you.
Moving on now to our final portion of the Matthew Rocke Show for this week of February 14th. I've got my second guest of the podcast being joined by my brother Micah Rocke now. And Micah, how's it going today?
It's going fantastic. Thanks for asking.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to join me. I've got some pretty great stories for you from around America over these last 5 days. And one of them has an awful lot of puns in it, and I'll get to that one. But first, I want to go to a story. This one is out of Louisiana. Drop in for dinner. Why don't you? It's a cool offer for a friend or family member to make to them or for them to make to you. But how about for a raccoon? Well, that's exactly what happened the other day at a dining hall at Louisiana State University. A raccoon dropped through the ceiling into a packed dining hall at LSU, causing students to scream and prompting a cook to try to capture the raccoon in a basket. Danielle Gibson told a student newspaper when she got to the dining room Wednesday, everyone was standing around trying to find the raccoon. She says she went on in to get her food thinking it was a fake, but Gibson changed her mind when the raccoon ran under her table. And, she leaped onto her chair to avoid it. Eventually, the raccoon, though, was captured.
Wow. That would have been an exciting lunch.
It'd be an extremely exciting lunch. I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember when we had the raccoon trying to steal all of our chickens that we were raising?
Yes, I do. I do remember that.
Yeah, that was
not a fun experience. Yeah, it was,
right.
It was a few years ago now. Through the cage. Yeah.
Right. And then we were able to capture that raccoon though and release it off into the wild somewhere else. So. All right, so you and I both worked on a strawberry farm, and here's a story about strawberries that's pretty interesting. It's enough of a strawberry to make a strawberry lawn cake, and now it has a place in the Guinness World Records. A strawberry tipping the scales at more than a half a pound has been named the world's largest. The 10.19-ounce berry was picked in Israel about a year ago, but it was only this week that it was confirmed as the heaviest. The record-holding strawberry is more than 2 ounces heavier than the previous record holder, which was grown in Japan back in 2015.
Wow. You imagine how happy those customers would have been if they could have been picking berries like that. All the customers are complaining about how small the berries are this year, man. That is some berry. My goodness.
No, it absolutely is. It's pretty incredible. Now, with the berry farm we worked at, they grew a type of berry called jewel berries, and some of those would get pretty big, but no, nothing close to 10 ounces. That's all. Absolutely incredible.
That is crazy.
Micah, what's your favorite kind of cheese?
Oh boy, I'd probably say Colby.
Okay,
Colby is definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's certainly a good one. We both grew up in Wisconsin, and so, of course, Wisconsin, a dairy state, a lot of cheese. Twitter has a bunch of punsters that took to Twitter on Thursday night after a Philadelphia blog alerted users that a local supermarket's cheese shelf had collapsed. Let me give you some of the examples. So first of all, the blogster posted the photo of the cheese shelf just completely collapsed with just cheese piled up all around it. And some of the comments were pretty fantastic, including, "Is there debris everywhere?" One person asking. Another one commented, "Build back cheddar," which I love that one. There's another one that said, "That's not Gouda." Another Twitter user commented, "I hope no injuries were incurred."
Oh my stars!
that one takes a little while to catch.
That's really good.
Another user, "Must have hurt. Some of that cheese is sharp." Oh man!
My goodness, that's
Right.
I love the creativity.
The list goes on there. So, but yeah, that is pretty funny. All right, moving on to another food topic. Okay, well, not technically food topic because it's about a pig, but then again, we get lots of food from a pig.
Yeah, and that includes bacon, which is, I mean, that's basically all you need.
Exactly. Well, officials in a village in the Mohawk region of New York say that the pig has to go, even though its owner, Ellie, or the owner says Ellie, the pig, is an emotional support animal. Ellie is a pot-bellied pig that has been there for its owner, as he has been through a divorce and the death of his mother. But officials in the town in New York say Ellie is a farm animal and that being kept as a pet is illegal. Her owner is trying to save Ellie's bacon despite possibly facing criminal charges for keeping her around. The owner says that he can't let go of part of his family. Pig fans has rallied support for Ellie, saying pigs should be seen as very loyal companions, not just a source of food. So,
wow, not sure what to say about that story. My goodness, you gotta love it.
No, you do. So some people, it's pretty crazy. But so it's kind of funny that you were just mentioning bacon, and then they were talking about how it's more than just food.
Right.
But yeah, I
think everybody really wants a pig to just be 100% bacon and forget the ham and all that. At least I do. Ham's okay, but let's just have the bacon, right?
Now we're seeing Micah's clear love of just food in this episode. So
I'm sorry. No, I'm sure that pig means a lot to that owner. And,
I know
what he's going through. I understand that. Yeah, it's just funny.
Right. Well, on the episode last week, I told the story about a cat that was found 1,500 miles from home. And I've got another story about something being far from home. A man in Norway has made an interesting find, a hard hat from the Maine Department of Transportation. The individual was picking up trash along Norway's coast recently when he found a white helmet buried in seaweed. The Boston Globe reports that the man learned the helmet came from Maine's DOT and got in touch with officials. They were impressed too, posting online that the helmet ended up 3,000 miles from home. But it won't have to make a return trip. A Maine DOT rep says the finder can keep the helmet and will be sent some other stuff from the state through some more conventional means.
It's crazy
that's
how
incredible.
Stuff can travel. Yeah, that really is. Wow.
Right, that's incredible. I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here, Micah. Have you ever lost something or came upon somebody else who had lost something and found it? Either sometime later or after a long time of looking.
Yeah, actually, one story I think of right away. We were playing softball with my older brothers used to coach a softball team that now actually I help coach.
Right.
But we were playing, and I was there just as the bat boy when I was much younger. And the team before us, they were leaving the dugout, and we were moving to the dugout for our game. And I noticed some people looking around, and they asked what they were looking for, and they had just gotten engaged, and this girl had lost her engagement ring somewhere in the dugout. And so I started helping them look for it, and I actually found the ring buried under some sand, like it had gotten sand brushed over it. And so I was able to find that ring for them and give it to them, and they were super excited because obviously it was a pretty valuable ring, and that was a really exciting moment for me just to be able to be part of that and finding that for them.
Absolutely. No, yeah, that is an incredible opportunity and find. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us for the Matthew Rocke Show. Thanks, Micah, for hopping on and providing here a little commentary on these last few stories. So recently, I taped a piranha to my boomerang, and as I did, I thought, this may come back to bite me.
That is so bad, Matthew.
It kind of is bad, but it's kind of funny too. So here's another one. One time I saw 4 guys beating up my brother Ethan, so I stepped in to help. He stood no chance against the 5 of us. Okay, that one's terrible. If Ethan's listening, hopefully he got a smile out of that one.
That's so mean. Ethan's not even here, man.
I know. Oh,
wow, that's good.
All right. Well, one last one for you. My brother, I really can't stand how he's been blowing everything out of proportion. I mean, he single-handedly destroyed my animal balloon business.
Wow. Wow. That's all I have to say about that, Matthew. Wow.
All right. Well, with that very poor note, we'll leave you. So thanks so much for joining us for the Matthew Rocke Show this week. We'll see you next time.